if you want to support the show, any of the shows, either this or whichever show, I'm not on right now because this is just a blanket ad for all of them, and the website, you can go to bewareofspoilers.com. In the description for any of the episodes of Beware of Spoilers, there is the option to donate. If you don't want to donate that way, you can donate directly through the website. We do have that, mwpnews.com. And if you don't want to support that way, then going to mwpnews.com will help out because we have ads there. We don't want to keep it, where there's a lot of ads. There's a few ads. But the point is we want to make it so that way, we can sustain this for the long term. If people donate, we're never going to paywall anything, I don't think, as of right now. But if people start donating, we'll start doing cooler and cooler stuff. Like donations are how we get to cover stuff like Tribeca and other, film festivals. And, we may be able to bring on more people to help out. So if you want to help out the show and you want more content from us, by all means, even just going and giving us a 5-star rating on Spotify helps out a lot. But that's it. That's the only ad we'll have on the podcast ever. But here's whatever podcast you're going to be listening to. Good morning, and welcome to a rare car episode of Exploring Hyperspace Lanes. I am Adam. If you listen to the other podcasts, you know these happen somewhat, not frequently. Well, I mean, frequently for Beware of Spoilers, but like 30-minute reviews happens, once in a blue moon. If something big happens and I have a lot of thoughts on it that, I don't want to wait on. And then on, what the backlog files, it hardly ever happens. I don't think it happened, period. And I figured it's been a bit since we had an episode, so I should probably put something up, because Josie's been really busy lately, with her, her real job, and, but I figured we should put something up while we wait for our return where we review Rogue One, Star Wars story, and put that on our rankings. So I feel like what would be a good topic to talk about is the impending end of the Star Wars comic. So, pretty early on after Disney acquired Star Wars and restarted or rebooted the canon, so it was just the movies in the Clone Wars, one of the things they started was Marvel Comics started doing a Star Wars ongoing, and it was a comic set between episodes 4 and 5 that told the story of what Luke was doing and Leia was doing and Han were doing, in between the movies, and then, there was also a dovetailing other comic, Darth Vader, that followed Vader during the same period. Then in I went to San Diego Comic-Con in 2018, not San Diego, New York, 2018, I went to New York Comic-Con, 2019 I went, it was 2018, no, it had to be 2019 when they did this. It was Project Luminous, which ended up being the High Republic, was announced. And then in January, they gave more information about it. And I was totally wrong in my speculation as to what Project Luminous was going to end up being. So, fuck me, I guess. But here's where we are. We'll preface this conversation with that. The thing we have here is, I look at, this, where I was going with that was, then in 2019 they announced they were rebooting the comic. Maybe it was 2018. I don't remember. I think it was it was either 2018 or 2019. I think it was 2019 because they wanted to, they didn't announce it because they didn't want to overshadow Rise of Skywalker. But either way, point is, they announced, okay, we're ending those two comics, we're relaunching them, continuing the name Star Wars and Darth Vader, because we're relaunching back at number 1, and now it's going to be set between episodes 5 and 6, telling the story of these characters between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. So, the point to all of this is, we are at a point now where when issue 50 launches later this year, that will be the end of those ongoings. And we will be reaching the point where the characters are headed into where they're, like, it's kind of like Places Please for where Return of the Jedi begins. And then part of the announcement was, okay, we're ending those, but don't worry, we're starting a new comic in a new era. Now, what could this be? I think it's an important question we have to ask ourselves. What could this new era that they're going to be? Now, I'm going to baselessly speculate. I have 5 things that I think it could be. And we're going to do what would be, I don't want to say most likely to least likely, but I'll say, like, because there's one that I think is pretty likely that I have pretty low, only because I don't want it to be that. But let's start out with, the first one. My first option that I think it is sequel trilogy era between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. That is when they talk about why they did these Star Wars comics between Episode 4, Episode 5, Episode 6, the reason they give is that these eras are largely unexplored. What happened in that year between? And there are some books that took place in that time, but what happened in these periods that's largely unexplored. So the ongoing comic allows you the opportunity to flesh out the characters more in this period and let them really grow. And you get some cool moments, like, there was, like Luke meeting Elzar Mann as a Force, ghost or a Force echo or something like that, in the more recent run. So that's one option. I think that fleshing out Rey and Kylo Ren in dovetailing stories is very interesting. And I think the key is they're going to want to have dovetailing stories, because that sells books. You can cross them over with each other. You can do all kinds. You go, we're building towards an event. We're and have them related to each other. That's something you can do and have it work. And I think that having Rey and Kylo Ren fleshed out more is a worthwhile thing, especially considering we have a movie coming in the near future that is going to be telling the story of what Rey is doing post, Rise of Skywalker, years later. I think Charmin Obaid-Chinoy is the one directing that one. I think it was Damien Lindelof who worked on the script, and now it's someone else. But the point is, I think that's probably the most likely, of my long, actually, probably second most likely. The most likely of the long shot ones, that's not what I think it's probably going to end up being, is before Phantom Menace. And I mean, during the, almost immediate lead up to the Phantom Menace. And what you do here is you have dovetailing stories. One comic is, instead of Darth Vader, it's Darth Sidious, as a story of Darth Sidious as apprentice to Darth Plagueis. And then you have, the other big one you do Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon and their adventures within the Republic as they're dealing with the rise of the Trade Federation. So you get a lot of things you can do with that. You can, do other comics like Aphra. You can do other comics like Bounty Hunters that will, kind of all intertwine and do these big events. But this also gives you a lot. And I think, of the options available, the best-selling option is probably a Darth Plagueis comic that kind of, because look at Thrawn, the book series Thrawn. We largely knew Thrawn's backstory by the time the Thrawn book came out, but once it was codified in Thrawn and Alliances and Treason, it became one of the best-selling books for them, and it became, and it had Timothy Zahn attached. I think who did the Darth Vader, Greg Pak, letting him do the letting him do a comic about Darth Sidious and his rise and the formulation of his plans and his exploration of the legacy of the dark side is a really interesting book. And then on top of that, allowing the Jedi to slowly, have to deal with their changing, their changing role in the universe, and how everything about that shifts for them is another thing that's like, oh, that's a really cool idea too. You get a lot there. So I think number 1, Rey and Kylo Ren between 8 and 9. Number 2, you get Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and then Sidious and Plagueis between, and then you get the cool thing where it's like, okay, so we have 2 Master and Apprentice stories, both of which have doomed masters, and it's an interesting, question that I would be interested to see those two books come together, especially if Charles Soule is writing, is continuing to write on Star Wars. That's a very good thing. Then number 3, I think you do, and this is a long shot because, and we'll discuss why in a minute. I think between 1 and 2, about Anakin and between Anakin and Obi-Wan, as Obi-Wan has taken on the role of, the Master to Anakin's Padawan. That could be interesting. Now, we've had this already explored. There's a series, Jedi Quest, that was like a young reader series, or like a mid-grade series, that followed this, where it was like Anakin is this student, and he has this rivalry with another, Padawan, and he wants to be more powerful, and no one sees this as a red flag for the dark side, but whatever, it is what it is, and, it was a good series. It was a worthwhile series, and the issue, and that is kind of the issue that I have with why I think this won't be it, but I think is a potential story space for them to explore in a comic. I think that if they're going to do something where they have a protagonist who's like 9-10 years old, that's something they're going to reserve for an animated series. And right now, there is no flagship animated series for the first time in a long time. We don't have Rebels, we don't have Clone Wars, we don't have The Bad Batch, we don't have any of that. I think if you're going to do a flagship animated series, you do the adventures of Anakin and Obi-Wan between those two, and then you also get the ability to explore Dooku, who would be the dovetailing thing, Dooku and Sidious, especially considering we know Dooku kills Yaddle. Like, that would be an interesting, addition there. Number 4 is the one that I feel in my heart of hearts is probably what they're going to end up going with. And I'm not thrilled about it, because this is, I think, the only option on this list that I would not seek out to read unless I did something really cool. And that is the continuing adventures of Anakin and everyone after Return of the Jedi, as they're establishing the New Republic. And the reason why I would not be as gung-ho about this is because this has been explored so much in canon, in legends, in just never-ending stories of just what happened after. And then on top of that too, like, I don't think that, we need to explore this really, because then it just creates glaring plot holes for, like, a lot of the other ones would serve to pave over plot holes. This one would just create a bunch. Why is Luke not involved in this? Why is Leia not involved in this? And on top of that too, it's like, you put them in a situation where they are beholden to other canon. I think that the comics work best when they are operating in periods where it's like, we don't have a ton of other canon for you to worry about contradicting. Like, that's where it works best. So if you're going to put them in, like, in this era, there's a lot of books already here. You have Aftermath, you have Battlefront 2, you have, I think Twilight Company is the same era, you have Alphabet Squadron. It's just an unending litany of, other media that take place in this same period that, okay, we're gonna put it there, but then what? Like, so we're just going to, we're gonna be, stuck, like, okay, so the story, like, Luke can't be here for this because Luke's here for this. It's kind of an odd choice to do, I think. So, and then on top, but the reason why I think it's the most likely is the next movie we concretely have coming down the line is is Mandalorian and Grogu. And then we also know there is an Heir to the Empire movie coming, which is going to be the end of the Mandalorian stories. So the idea that like doing this here could make sense, like just for a synergy, which is something that we've seen Marvel do with Disney's properties pretty often, is just they want to synergize as much as possible. But the issue that I have is I feel like this is the least interesting because we've had a lot happen here already. I mean, The Mandalorian takes place in this era too, unless they're setting it before The Mandalorian, but at that point, like, okay, cool. Beyond this, there's one other option it could be. One other option. And this is something that until the website is updated, I will put as the possible final option on every one of these articles, or every one of these stories. And that is the Old Republic. Right now, if you go on the website and look at the eras, StarWars.com, I think it's /eras. If you go to the MWPnews.com article about this, I have a direct link to it, and I have a picture of a screenshot of what it says under the High Republic, or under the Old Republic. And if you look through the eras, there's something for each. There's nothing listed for Dawn of the Jedi. There's nothing listed for New Jedi Order. Dawn of the Jedi, we know is being made into a movie with James Mangold. New Jedi Order, we know is being made into the movie with Rey from Charmin Obey-Chinoy. So, we know there's stuff in those two eras. Every other era has something except for the Old Republic, which is still there in canon. And the Old Republic is the formation of the Jedi Order and the schism that arises between the Jedi and members of the Sith who are in the Jedi Order and leads to the formation of the Order of the Sith. This is where the Mandalorian Jedi War takes place. This is where the Jedi-Sith War and the Sith Empire take place. And right now, the only thing that exists that could be in this period is the what was it called? The Knights of the Old Republic remake. But typically, if a game is remade, it maintains its legend status. Like when they remade Episode 1 Racer, when they re-released it later this year, when they re-release later this year, Dark Forces, or if that might actually already be out, or if they, when they re-released, with the HD remasters, Battlefront and Battlefront 2, that didn't canonize the story of the 501st. Like, that's the situation they find themselves in, is that it's like, okay, so do we, how do we integrate this all together? And I think if Knights of the Old Republic is just a ground-up remake, but following the story of Revan the same way, I think what you end up with is it's not canon. It still falls into Legends, which puts you, and that's a big if, because we haven't heard anything about this game in quite some time, and I think the trailer's been taken down off YouTube. So, we don't even know if the game is still happening. So right now, we have nothing in this era that we know for certain is canon. This would be an excellent place to do a comic. Do the story of the Schism, do the story of the Jedi-Sith War, or the the Sith Empire. Like, flesh this out in a comic. I think that has a lot of potential. I think we'll hear more about this at San Diego Comic-Con. But those are my thoughts. If you agree with me or disagree, you can go to MWPnews.com and, leave a comment on the article, or you can comment on Spotify with the, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know. Until our next episode, when Josie gets back, or if some other really big news happens, have a great rest of your week.